Manhattan, and it's also where we find our very own Lisa Evers, who is tracking this case. Lisa, you've seen so many big cases down here in Lower Manhattan, there at Pearl Street, and this certainly is one that ranks near the top of the list. Good morning. What are you seeing out there?
Well, good morning, Dan. I would say that this is at the top of the list from anything that I have ever seen, including when they had El Chapo here in New York to stand trial. He was staying at the same federal detention center as Maduro did and his wife did last night, MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Let me just talk with you for a moment about the security that is here. Everything looks pretty calm and cool, as you see in the picture that you're showing, that we're showing live, where you're seeing me talking here. But I have to tell you, the perimeter here is extremely locked down. They have not only the U.S. Marshal Police, who are typically at the federal courthouses, the U.S. Marshal Service is here, which they typically are as well. There's also DHS, HSI. There's many undercover law enforcement officers here as well. And then, of course, a huge presence from the NYPD, which actually organized this penned-in area where we're restricted to a specific area of where we can go live just to keep the traffic flowing. Up in the sky, we see there are drones from the NYPD carrying live feeds into their command center at police headquarters. They want this to go off without a hitch. So in terms of the flow of traffic, there's regular traffic, as you can see behind me, on the street here on Pearl Street. But in terms of the foot traffic, people are restricted to certain zones. There are law enforcement, various agencies pretty much everywhere to make sure that no one gets too close. The protesters that you were just showing are being kept at the other end of the block that we are on here on Pearl Street in front of the courthouse. They're restricted to a penned-in area. There were about a couple dozen when I first came over here, expressing their points of view. Some pro this capture and prosecution of the Venezuelan leader, others against it, saying the U.S. stay out of Venezuela. But what's happening here today, 12 noon, Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores de Maduro, are expected to be arraigned on this sweeping federal indictment of narco trafficking, weapons, and other charges, along with several other co-defendants. And Dan, one of the things that's interesting too is one of the co-defendants in this superseding indictment, which was just done recently, leading up to his apprehension, is the person who is allegedly the leader of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang, which we saw a lot of them being deported early last year, and many of them being arrested for various crimes, not just here in New York, but also across the United States. But it's a very intense scene here, Dan, and they're not taking any chances whatsoever. Everybody on guard, and a lot of different posts and the perimeter, which is how you can always tell how many rings of security they put in. I've never seen this many rings of security at any of the major trials that we've covered here. Dan?
Certainly when you talk about a head of state that will be arraigned there in Lower Manhattan, New York City, I mean, you sort of touched on it, the migrant crisis that we saw, the influx of so many of these Venezuelan migrants and the arrests that unfolded, and now we have the former president of Venezuela there. Talking about some of these charges, this is obviously a moment in the Trump administration where they have pressed forward with a plan to execute what they say is a search warrant to abduct or to take in Maduro and his wife. The president was asked about it on Air Force One last night, sort of a justification or a reasoning for the thought behind it. Let's take a listen to what he said there, and then we'll get a little bit more into some of the legality of what's going to happen today.
Slog of a trial. The judge is very respected, Judge Ellerstein. He's a highly respected judge. We'll see how we do. The case it's infallible. People are so happy with what we've done.
We could expect there to be a bail detention hearing, which.
All right, so we heard there that there's going to be this bail hearing that will happen. And there's another piece of sound that I wanted to play here. And this is going to be from Arthur Aidala, who was on Good Day New York a little earlier. He's talking about the complexity of this case, especially when it comes to trying a former head of state. Let's take a listen to that.
They're able to connect the dots to say that these drugs that are being sold within the Southern District of New York, or there's some nexus to the Southern District of New York. They could be selling it in Brooklyn, which is not the Southern District, but they went through Manhattan and touched Manhattan enough that it's in the Southern District, that he's part of a conspiracy. He doesn't have to touch drugs, he didn't have to touch money, but he's part of an agreement between 2 or more people to distribute drugs in the United States of America.
All right, so that was Arthur Aidala speaking. And Lisa, as you mentioned, that chopper took Maduro and his wife from Bush Terminal Pier Park, from Brooklyn. They landed at the Wall Street heliport. The motorcade then went up FDR Drive, the Brooklyn Bridge exit, makes a right, left into Pearl Street, that frozen zone that surrounds One Police Plaza. For many of our viewers, there's going to be a lot of questions of why can't we see what's happening inside the courtroom? A lot of times when it's a state case, you do get some of the pictures. This is different though, right? I mean, people shouldn't expect to see like live cameras inside.
Dan, listen, it's one of the great frustrations of reporting on these major cases. I mean, we especially felt it during the Diddy trial, which was held at this very same courthouse, the Southern District Courthouse here. And it is the federal laws are very, very strict about not allowing cameras in the courtroom. And they got so careful with making sure that didn't happen during the Diddy trial. There was an overflow room in addition to the main courtroom, which wasn't very big. There was an overflow room for the public and also for the press. There was a press section in there as well. They were checking people. They kicked out one person who had on glasses that could, the glasses that you can record with a camera. They initially allowed us to use binoculars so that we could hone in on the witnesses. And actually, there was a very good picture on the video. And then they started banning those because they caught somebody coming in with binoculars that could record. So any type of recording device, when you go into that federal court, you see right behind me, you have to check your phone, you have to check your Apple Watch. When it's on the top level of security like it is today, you have to check even car remotes, your car remote key, you have to check that. Anything of that nature, they asked to check in. But I think one of the things that's really important about this is, they're used to handling this, and also the judge, to what the president was saying in the soundbite you just played there. One of the things that was interesting about this is the judge who was hearing this arraignment today, and who most likely be on this case, because usually they don't switch, the judge that's assigned follows it all the way through, oftentimes I'm told, with these major federal court cases. He is the same judge that denied the Trump use of that Alien Enemies Act, which they were trying to use against some of the gang members and other Venezuelan individuals who were in the United States and undocumented, and he ruled against that. He said that could not be used to deport people in that manner. So he has a very tough reputation, a reputation of very much going according to the law. And you pointed out the politics. There's a tremendous amount of politics in this situation. But I was speaking yesterday. I was calling people around. We were getting ready for today. And we are going to have Arthur Aidala back at 12 noon, and a federal trial attorney joining us here at 1 o'clock for Newsroom Live to go more in depth on this once we know what's happening. But another federal trial lawyer I was talking to, who does these major cases, these major drug cases, said to me, Lisa, he goes, if you take off the table who the accused are, you take off the president, you take off his wife, you take off their son, who is also named in it, Nicolásito, who they call the prince or Nicolásito. It's a regular, not a regular, but it's like a typical major narco trafficking case. Now, the interesting thing too that we're going to be trying to find out, which probably won't reveal itself until this proceedings go on further, if this is considered, under certain federal laws, they are, in these major trafficking cases, they are allowed to seek the death penalty. So I think that's going to be a question, according to what the lawyers I was talking to yesterday were telling me. That's a question that's going to come up at some point down the road. But the charges are staggering, and as Arthur pointed out in his explanation, if the president, they must have a lot of proof. If they had the alleged leader of Tren de Aragua, who was running this huge international operation, which we saw even in the Bronx here in New York. running guns, running drugs, bringing people in, kicking down apartment doors, and wholesale taking over apartments and apartment buildings to run their operations and terrorizing the residents. That if you take that away, this is another major case like that. So, and with this type of no nonsense judge, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. It'd be very highly unlikely from the attorneys I've been talking to this morning that the judge will grant any type of bail given the scope of the charges and the number of co-defendants as well. But we'll see what happens. And I'm sure the president was not, and his wife were not too happy with their accommodations last night at MDC Metropolitan Detention Center, which, Dan, as you know, a couple years ago we reported on the lack of heat there. It was a very cold winter. There's a lot of, but I'm sure they had super tight security, but there's no VIP guest suites at that location for sure. Dan?
There are no accommodations for a president or the first lady of any country, certainly at the Manhattan Detention or Metropolitan Detention Center. Lisa, before I let you go, and you sort of touched on this, but just for people who may just be tuning in, this is the president of Venezuela, former president, and the first lady being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center. And that's the same location that we've seen so many high-profile cases just within the last, almost 2 years. Can you talk? This is Mangione, this is Diddy, this is.
Yes.
Who is it? The same place?
Yes, this is absolutely the same place. This is I call it the notorious MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center. It's in Brooklyn in Sunset Park. It's on the water. It's also close to open areas there because it's basically very close to an industrial park. So it's easy for them to secure. And there have been many high-profile people. That's where Sean Diddy Combs was throughout his trial until he was transferred to Federal Correction Institute Fort Dix in New Jersey, which is a low security. MDC is a maximum security institution, Dan. It's for a lot of people who are awaiting a federal trial and a lot of people who have been convicted. It's where they took El Chapo. It's where R. Kelly was here. There are many convicted criminals who have been there as well. Many drug kingpins go through there, people whose names we don't know, but whose crimes are costing them many years of their life. And there have been a lot of security concerns about it. There used to be the MCC, the Metropolitan Correction Center, which used to be right behind the courthouse you see behind me. That was closed after the death of Jeffrey Epstein, interestingly enough, because there were so many security and condition issues with conditions there. And I've been in both of them. I was in MDC 2 years ago. We were allowed into a public area, a small public area, but that's it. You can't even, people come out of there describing the conditions as being extremely rough in a lot of ways, nowhere near what we see in some of these TV shows and movies. Dan?
No doubt about it. Lisa, thank you so much. I know it's a busy day for you. We'll let you go. Thank you very much for the excellent information there, Lisa Evers. We appreciate it. So 10:16, we're going to take a quick break. As we go to break, we'll sort of put it back out to one of our live cameras. This is going to be Live View 3, and it's the demonstration that's happening out there. Many of the folks here are actually in support of the U.S. action, Venezuelan Americans who are supporting what the Trump administration has done. Certainly there are others who feel that the U.S. has overstepped its boundaries and is in a very, very dangerous situation. Either way, Nicolás Maduro, former president of Venezuela, and his wife facing federal criminal charges, set to be arraigned here in Lower Manhattan in about an hour and 45 minutes from now. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.